Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode, we're getting into starting over again. Starting again.
I like the where to begin again.
Where to begin
like
again?
the title of our very first episode.
Do I need to restart this again? I'm Russ, and that's Tim. I didn't give our full names, but that's okay. Sometimes
That's okay.
we can just shorten things up. This is a bit of a curveball episode because we're starting again.
We're starting again. Where do we begin again?
Where do we begin again? I was going to start with you because I always do. I always throw you a question.
Nice.
I prefaced earlier that this won't be a curveball question because it's a curveball episode. But how do you feel about starting again? How are you feeling starting again with your...
I've got like one foot in the muck, like the old book, and trying to get that out.
Yeah.
And then I've got one foot in the future. So I feel a little divided. I really do kind of wish I could let go of the old one completely and just focus on the new.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about the new story. I think all the things that we've learned over the past, year or two have been really, really helpful in planning for the new book. I think I've had so much more intentionality behind the process this time.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if the product at the end of it all will benefit from it, but at least in this moment right now, I feel like I know so much more about my characters. I know so much more about my story. But the one thing that I need to do, and this is something we talked about 50 something episodes ago, is I need to start to work out a schedule where I'm actually writing.
Yeah.
Because the planning has been a trap. Like I did my research, I did my comps, I did my beats, I did a whole scene breakdown, Russ. I've got a freaking spreadsheet.
Wow.
I've got
so proud of
every
you.
chapter, POV, word, all the things that we said we should be doing last time that I was not doing.
Yeah.
I'm doing it now. But you know what? I can't stop doing it. I can't. And I need to kind of like let go a little bit and get into that creative process, which I think is very, very different, at least for me.
Yeah.
But like the pragmatic planning and then the kind of flow state of writing, they're two very different things. And I need to like let go of what now have become almost security blankets for me.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm working because I'm filling out these cells and I'm doing character. I even did like the character archetypes. I'll tell you, this is a helpful podcast.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Even if it's
I
just
feel
for us.
good. To synopsize, I feel very good.
Good.
But I do need to
Stop.
dive into the actual writing of it and not just the planning of it. I've completely flopped from like a straight pantser to like can't stop planning. How about you? You're actually moving along. You're like...
We've flipped. I have like scaled...
You've infected me with your planning.
And then I ran away from you. I have I've actually kind of flipped a little bit. I think my planning now is a little more focused, where the first time I wasn't. In a way, I scaled it back. I mean, I still have my scene breakdown, doing the beats, kind of outlining all of that. Characters, I've got my, rough profiles of kind of who they are, not getting too detailed like I did the first time around. Kind of letting, when it says to get into writing, kind of letting that find itself. So I took I think a little bit of... I think focused planning is a more accurate way of describing this approach. I feel like last time I was like over planning and overly concerned about having every single detail outlined and all the ticks and the way the characters and all this sort of stuff. And I could kind of pull that back and letting some of those things get discovered while writing. Scene breakdown, though, is something I need. I need that for me just to keep chugging along and to see that progress and knowing kind of where I'm going. But I've changed so many things already. And I'm 22,000 words into the second book.
22,000 already?
Yeah. I should be further.
That's great.
I should be further. But I'm just coming to the end of the first act. There's a bunch of stuff introduced in the first act that I've got to now deal with in Act 2 and Act 3. New things I'm trying to keep.
So are you aiming for like 70 to 100K?
I'm aiming for 90. So yes, I'm aiming for
Okay.
Such a range that you gave me. It's like the Comcast range. You're aiming for between 50 and 100. I'm aiming for 90, knowing that that'll get it pared down to like probably 80 or so, which is where I want to be. I want to be in like the 300 to 350 page range. So first one was 71,000, which came up to about 288. So
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Two-parter. One, when you were in between books, right? You'd finished Host. You were planning additional novels.
Yeah.
You had a couple ideas.
Yep.
swirling around.
Yep.
First part,
Yep.
how did you land on this one? What drew, like what and why?
Okay. I'm going to answer that first.
Yeah, answer that one first.
Okay, so I had two story ideas like that came out of writing Host, two story ideas for Lilo, the hacker character in Host, and then I had a bunch of ideas that were like all over the place. I have like the Western horror thing that you and I kind of worked on, and then I have this sci-fi time travel
Yeah,
one.
the time travel one, right?
Yeah,
That was like I thought that was top of the heap for a little while.
it was, and then I was like, I kind of want to wait until I get better at storytelling before I tackle that one.
Before you tackle time travel.
Yeah, before I solve for time travel. No, that one's pretty well along, like kind of outlined, but I still need to kind of picture the world and figure that out. But I've got basic story kind of there, and it felt like too far of a departure. And I have like another random sci-fi one I kind of wrote some scenes for, which I was like, oh, I'm just playing around this what this might be. But I settled on this one because I'm still in that thriller kind of mode, and this is squarely in that. Yeah. And it'll be a nice, I think, complement to Host, like a follow-up. And then the third book will be kind of rounding that out a little bit. So I kind of want to stay in that world, especially like, people are reading it and they're curious what's going to happen next with these characters and they want to see what's going to happen with Lilo. I feel like it'd be like, I don't think it would have been good for me to just jump into a whole new set of characters and this whole different world while I'm still here and in the mindset and like learning how to, develop a character. And I've got one pretty strong one right now. So that's kind of why I decided to stick with this. And then that third book will probably just be me writing that third book in this kind of, I wouldn't call it a Host trilogy, but kind of Lilo's story arc. So, but yeah, that's kind of why I want to stick with it. Stick with the same characters, stick with the same genre. Because once I jump to a Western, horror Western, or like a sci-fi time travel, it's going to be different mindset.
Big difference.
Yeah.
All right. Part two of my question.
Part two.
And this is a selfish question. You do your planning, you did your beats, you did your scenes.
Yeah.
How did you stop and start writing? How did you know when it was time to sit down? And did you like have a set schedule, a set time of day where you're doing it?
How did I know? I knew once I got the beats done and I had my scene breakdown in pretty good shape. Like I think I'm missing like 15 to 20 scenes in there. Like I was aiming for like 100 or so scenes. I think I have like 80 or so right now. Man, I just got really excited. So I kind of just was like, I've got enough here to get going and like I know where I need to end up. And I felt good about everything. I felt good about the characters and the story and where to begin. Where to begin. So I just started. And then kind of
now I feel like I did mine wrong because I guess I don't have a scene breakdown. I have a chapter breakdown.
Yeah, I just do it by scene. So, because like the scenes could be like, you can have multiple scenes within a chapter. So I just like, what are the most important things to happen in this moment? And sometimes I'll have like a bunch of things listed out and like they'll end up mashing together and or getting deleted entirely. So
it's funny because I'm like, I'm going to pants all that. So it's good to know that I'm still pantsing a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's fine. I think like just for me, I think knowing what information is important to drop in a particular moment and what's moving things along. And I think that's really what the scene breakdown was for me. It's not a one-to-one like scene equals chapter. It's, there could be 2 or 3 different quote unquote scenes within a chapter with the same character for me. And like I said, sometimes those will mash together and turn into like one chapter or one scene, but kind of just, it's a combination of like scene plus like information that needs to be happening to move things along and action and whatnot. So, yeah, no, I've taken a little chapter out of your book. Sorry for the pun. And I've kind of just been pantsing a little bit more this time around. And it's been a little more freeing, and also I'm discovering some fun things along the way. So
interesting, right? Because you're pantsing a little bit more, but so much more. Like you're locked into your POV in a way that was still kind of up in the air for Host the first time, right? Yeah, so now you're doing limited third?
Yep. Which is huge in of itself. Like
coming
into second project and knowing some of these things right off the bat and like knowing some of those things right off the bat and just knowing exactly how to approach them. Like definitely POV. What a change. Because then that completely that's how you're writing things, so, and how you're picturing the world that your characters are in. So it makes it very easy just to start writing. There was no hesitation. It was like, okay, it's going to be limited third. I've got one character who I already know pretty well, and then I've got these other ones who I'm kind of coming up with as I go, and they're kind of discovering themselves, and I know I'll probably refine them a bit more in like draft 2, draft 3, but...
And what about schedule? Do you have a set time of day, set days? Is it every day, all the time, nonstop writing?
It should be every day in the morning, 2,000 words. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
It's not been.
2000 is a high bar.
It's not been that. It's been 500, which is fine. It's fine. But if I'm like taking this serious, I need to be writing. I need to be doing it at that clip every single day, and it's not hard to get there. You know, once you get 2-3 days into it, you'll go from writing 1,000 words to 1,500, and before you know, you're doing 2,000 words, and you'll forget how much that you need to stop. To
Yep.
not burn yourself out. So yeah, I'm trying to do 2,000. Same schedule I always had. I think I had during the first book. So this is something I'm not restarting. It should be the same. It should be 2,000 words a day, and I find that's a sweet spot.
7 days a week?
No, 6 days a week.
6 days a week.
I take at least one day off throughout the week, or if something comes up, I'm like, okay, I'm just not writing today. It's fine, but got to get back into that. And that's the end of the day. Like, just writing is the only way I'm going to get better at this. The only way I'm going to get the story done. So
I'll tell you what happened on my side, right? Where when I was writing, I had my routine. It was just about every morning, from 7 to 9 or whatever. I'd bang out some words. Editing, that turned into a huge process, but same thing. I was like very strict with my schedule, and I was putting in 4 to 6 hours a day. When it was at its absolute worst. When I stopped and I went into query mode with the other book, which has been much more sporadic and really obviously not particularly enjoyable, that routine, that schedule broke. And what happened is other things have crept in, like, and right now, like, obviously I've got my 9 to 5, which has creeped in, but I start working before my 9 to 5. The time that I would use for myself, I am giving to work.
Yep.
Running has crept in. So that's all to say that, like, when I'm thinking about, how to begin again, I need to slowly get back into that daily routine, because I let other priorities come in, as they always do, which is why like it always feels like we never have time for something else.
Yep.
So I'm trying to build it back.
Yeah.
But I haven't yet. Instead, I kind of like, since my brain is working in that pragmatic way, I'm like, oh, I'll pluck away at these character descriptions, or I'll like these things that I don't necessarily need to do, but they're making me feel productive.
Yeah. I was just going to say, that's why you haven't got to the point of just writing, because you're probably filling that. I've done something because I wrote a little quick character description, or, something like that. Like,
or I fell back into, like, since I've gotten like a handful of rejections for critical mass, for querying it, I was like, well, I should work on my first 10 pages again. So I poured, time into trying to make that a little more marketable.
Yeah.
And a little less like a day in the life, and a little more like jump forward to where the action is.
Yep.
To what avail, I don't know.
And I'm having the same issue, a different type of issue, but basically our first project interfering with our second one, because we're in different spots of that, right? You're still doing querying, so you have one actually sending out query letters, which, you shouldn't make them manufactured. Boom, okay, ship, but you need to get them moving, right? And then you're also finding yourself.
And I did, right? And now that like I feel like I'm in this moment of time where I've got a batch out, and I'm in between sending like another batch. I'm like, I need to try something else, because nothing's sticking. So if you only get to send the first 10 pages, how do I make that? And I did, if the core of it is right now is that since I'm in this in-between phase of like the old and the new, I am scared, is probably the right term, that if I pour myself into the new book, I'm not doing justice to the old one. And that it's starting to feel like, because I've left a book in the past before. That I never really finished and never really saw the light of day. And in hindsight, I feel okay about that. But I don't want that to happen with this one.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get so distracted and poured, like, I don't know.
It's a balance.
Who knows? It probably could be an irrational fear, but I don't want to leave the other one behind for the new shiny.
I've always heard, like, in all the research I've been doing for marketing books and whatnot, like, you can do all this stuff on social media and ads and all this sort of stuff you can do to get your book out there, get your reviews and whatnot. But when it comes down to the best marketing for your first book is your second book. And I'm wondering if it's like, probably in the same vein for you, it's like, even if critical mass doesn't get picked up right away, you write a second book and you're still querying, and maybe you start querying the second book, and all of a sudden you're like, I've got this other one already done. Like, and people are like, oh, okay, you got 2 in the hopper ready to go. Maybe
or even if I
there's,
end up self-publishing critical mass, like if
yeah,
I have, sales to point to or whatever,
yeah,
um, it's really hard, I think, for a first-time author with zero published works to break in anyway, zero short stories,
yeah.
zero self-published. So I think you're 100% right that the best thing I can do is kind of march forward, but tell that to me, you know.
I am right now. I find it interesting how our approaches have kind of like somewhat shifted a little bit. How you've taken on this
Yeah.
more planning aspect to the point where you were probably me 4 years ago when I was planning my first one, and I was just planning everything that nothing made any
Yeah.
sense. It's
It
like,
still sounds like you're planning is in more depth than mine, but I can't tell you, and I'm happy for it, but I did like my 15 beats, and whatever the sub beats are for Act 3.
yeah,
I've gone through those 3 times. I've
yeah,
refined them three. Like they are, I wanted to make sure they weren't just the beats, but they were satisfying beats. It made sense to the characters. That's something I did not do
yeah,
the
yeah. No,
first time.
no, no, and I feel like I'm doing the same. I think what coming out of the first one, I don't want to have like a bunch of docs I have to update. I think that was my sense for this. It's like, what's the most important thing I have? And it's like my brief treatment, story beats doc, and my scene breakdown, and that's it. Before I had like all these other different things. Like all I'm doing is updating stuff, and that's not what I want to be doing. I want to be writing the story. So it's like, what's the most important? And having the beats and just having like the shortest synopsis of what each beat is and what's supposed to happen there, and making sure that's tight. So if I do have to change something, I'm not reading and spending hours updating something that
Yeah.
is important as a guide. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of like what's in my head, what's on paper, and what's actually happening. So, but I think right now it's like once it gets to the point of having the scene breakdown, that's probably the most important thing for me, and making sure
Yeah.
that's maintained, because when I go back for like revisions, like that's gonna be the doc I have to point at and be like, okay, here's where things are unfolding, and I've got a pretty complicated little plot going on here. I mean, it's not, but
Yeah.
it is. If that makes any sense, it's like in my head, I'm like, I can picture it. I know what's going on. I start explaining to people. I'm like, okay, we're going to make this a little more simpler. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
one thing.
funny. It sounds like I should continue to plan because my
No,
breakdown isn't as detailed as yours.
no, don't do that. Don't do that. This first go through. I mean, I know you've seen my spreadsheet where I've got, kind of quick scene description, what's supposed to happen, a real quick summary, POV, location. Location was one I didn't have the first time I needed because I have characters all over the place, so I need to know where everyone is.
Yeah.
And then I had like the goals and conflict in there. And those things I'm not filling in until I start writing the scene now.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I have an
Wow.
idea. I have an idea of what the conflict and the goal is supposed to be in there, but I didn't
Yeah.
fill that out ahead of time because like it's just changing
Interesting.
scene to scene. So now I'm like, okay, this fits, and now I'll fill it in. So when I go back to revisions, I can see like, do I actually accomplish that? Do I do this do I remember repeating this somewhere else? So
Yeah.
I'm finding that's streamlining a bit and making me just write versus, again, updating a spreadsheet, spending more time updating a spreadsheet when I should just be writing words and
Yeah.
kind of solving those things as I go. So I know you got a lot more things. You got a lot of things, full-time work and everything like that. Family, obviously. What's your goal for in like setting a schedule? I know you kind of touched on it, but do you have like a spot you want to get to, like a word count per day, or
Yeah. I mean,
did you have one for the first book or no?
no. I mean, I tried to aim for like 1,000 to 2,000 a
Okay.
day or something.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Some days it would be over and some days it would be under.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like, I'm going to knock this scene out because there was such little planning in the first one. I really ended up carving up a lot of my writing into chapters like after the fact, like, oh, that's, 5,000 words. That's way too long for a single chapter.
Yeah.
Let's break it into two. For better or worse, I always equate things to exercise. And I do feel like I need to start slow right now.
Yeah.
So I want to like put in 2 or 3 days a week pretty consistently, before work begins and just try to bang out 500 words. Like that's kind of my goal.
Yep.
I still have my brain where I'm like, oh, I should really tidy up those character descriptions, but I am probably ready to begin knowing all the work that I've already put into this.
Yeah.
And I've had excuses not to along the way. And I think some of them were good ones, like refining the beats or making sure that I have a satisfying act 3, at least for me, because I was hung on that, as listeners of the cast will know, for weeks and weeks. I finally landed on something that I feel pretty good about that, has not happened in any books or movies. We'll see if it lands.
Yeah.
So I think I have enough to start. And then there's the research moments, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
One thing I'm definitely doing differently this time around, first for first draft, specifically I'm talking about, is when I get to a moment, I am not getting hung up on it and spending time in a rabbit hole of research just to get through one moment. Now, now I find myself just doing this. I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is accurate. Let me just flag it. I put a comment on it and be like, I make a note for myself, research this. Does this make sense? And I move on.
Oh, interesting.
And I think, that's helped me just like.
So you're not like going down a rabbit hole of research. I remember you were doing that in the first one, you know, making sure that like the tech and the science was on point.
Yeah.
And that would be a speed bump or a roadblock.
Now I'm like, flag this.
Smart.
Do the research later, come back to it. You know, my next, revision would be me going through all my notes and kind of ironing that out.
Interesting.
But like in my head, I just want to get the story and the movement and the pacing, and I just want to get, not even pacing, I just want to get the story out. I just want to get the plot along and like cover my major beats and just get like that first blueprint done from start to finish. And being more, and it's helped because it's like, okay, I don't have to think about this right now. You can think about it later. Just don't get hung up on it. It's okay if you don't know.
That's smart, man. I mean, think about it. When I mentioned it before, there really is like when writing kind of takes control and you're in the story, you do hit that flow state. And I think a great way to stop that is Googling stuff incessantly and trying to figure out something that you haven't completely figured out yet. So coming back to that and treating that during a revision, I think is super smart.
Yeah, and I think it's at least I've got the skeleton idea of what's going to happen. And there's some things where, I should probably make a decision now because that might impact what's going to happen later on or as I continue. And I don't want to totally screw myself. But like some bigger things or small things, I'm like, just look this up later. And I can add some detail here and there. Like that's what drafts 3 and 4 are going to be for, Now it's just like, just get it out. Just get the story done. Have it start, middle, end. Just crank it out. That's kind of my mindset with this. It's kind of my mindset with this one. I think that's also why I pared back the planning up front and just cutting down to what I actually need. And I wouldn't have known that until I did this once. You don't know that until you've gone through at least once to know. You can read all you want, but once you find the thing that works for you, and I'm not even sure if this is going to be right for me either. I'm just going to see how this one comes out. And I'll make adjustments again. But right now, I'm pretty happy with what I have, trying to keep it as minimal as possible, in terms of like the planning documents, and then just writing. Like I've got bullet points of what a scene should be done. Like I can just write it, just do it. Trying to keep that mantra going.
I'll tell you something we said in one of our podcasts is kind of my guiding light for this process, and it wasn't for my first one. And it's something that you wouldn't look for in a dinner guest, but the come late, leave early. Like that's something I did not do in the first one. I, came early and overstayed my welcome. Like in just about every chapter. But I want to make sure that I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind. I don't need to be overly detailed in everything. It's okay to jump in a little bit and
discover stuff as you're there,
as you go along
in the moment. And I think it's been, I don't know, how long have we been doing this for? A year now or something, year and a half. And it's fun to look back at like the things that we screwed up on maybe, or, and paying attention to now, like even our last few episodes of like, chapter structures, scene transitions, and some of the stuff will just kind of start coming naturally, but being a little more intentional of those things that we weren't before. I think both of us were so fearful of like our Act 3 pitfalls and, paying more attention to that. So I think like we're just kind of naturally starting to pick those things and have maybe a little intentionality with some of the stuff.
It's almost like we should have started the podcast
first
during this one. Instead, we're learning with everybody else out there.
Yeah, and as we go, I think it's
learning as we go.
Once we get to the revision, the second round of second time going through like editing and revisions, I think that we're going to have so much more to like.
We never said we were professionals. We said we were amateurs that were learning how to do this.
That's correct. Just to reiterate that.
Come on a ride with us.
I guess I've made money. Well, I haven't made money selling my book yet, but.
Well, you've made money. You just haven't made your money back.
Yes. So, right. Once you sell something, doesn't that make you a professional?
I'll tell you one thing I definitely feel is that I feel like I wrote a whole book.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it. It feels like this is the first book I've ever written,
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I know a lot more and I think I can see the whole process.
Yeah.
But looking back, I mean, that's what I'm a little scared of. The other one kind of feels a bit like, I don't know, a photo album of a school I used to attend, like it's a yearbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I shove it under my bed or I try to sell it on eBay?
It's one of those weird things where here we are, we finished our first ones, right? And we're like, those are our babies. And you look at authors who've written like 20 novels or something, or 15, 10 novels, 5 novels or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do they look at their first couple of books, And it's like, what's their level? Are they past it? Are they over it and just like, I'm working on the next one and just moving on?
Yeah.
Like how is like that change? How does your perspective change once you have a couple books out there? Because like right now I feel like we're so sensitive to the first one, but it's like by the time we get to like 3 or 4, I'm like, that thing was a piece of crap.
Yeah. I feel like mine's like shouting at me from another room saying, I'm not done yet. You haven't finished me.
Yeah. Yeah. I just feel that this is, for me, I think it's just going to get better, And I think that's just what happens when you you do something repeatedly, right?
Yeah. And I do want to say, right, like even though I don't feel great about where critical mass is right now, and nobody's throwing thousands of dollars at me during this query process, anything I can do to get back to the daily writing, that was super beneficial for me. And I say it all the time, but I know it sounds trite, but I think the writing itself is the goal, and the product is almost a byproduct of it. Like I know we want to be published. I know you want to be read. I know like there's some monetary, value to these things.
Sure.
But what was giving me happiness was like the problem solving, the creating, the kind of being in this flow state and feeling like I accomplished something on a like daily basis. Granted, there's also that moment of when you're writing that you're an absolute crazy person and nobody can understand the things you're talking about and the stories you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
But Jesus, it feels like you're the most productive person in the world when you start building these characters and building these worlds. And
100%.
It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, you just have to find a way to keep doing it, keep doing it. So
I tell my kids all the time, they're like, "Hey, did you win the running race you were in?" And I'm like, no, I don't run to win. I run because I enjoy it on some level.
Yeah.
And I want to take writing as the same thing. Like I'm not going to sell, 800,000 copies of this book. I might sell 1,000.
You never know.
I mean, I think success is different, right? For me, I don't run to place in a race. I try to run, daily because I enjoy the routine and the process of it. And I think writing is super similar.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've started again, and that's it. You
got to have a schedule and some planning, but not too much planning.
Yeah. You need to find a balance. You got to find that balance.
So does that mean 50 episodes from now, we would have both finished our second books?
Oh, yeah. Right?
So stay tuned for our 106th episode.
No, it's got to be sooner than that, man. It's got to be sooner than that. Sooner than that for me, at least.
When I'm querying 2 books.
At the same time. What happens? It's going to be one of our episode topics. Episode 101. Querying 2 books at the same time. Should I? It's like clickbaity article headlines. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where we are starting again. So I think when it comes down to it, just having a set schedule and making sure you're shutting yourself off from going down rabbit holes. Whether it's just make a note of something and move on if you're in the middle of writing. For me, I think it's gonna be huge to get through this first draft. So just
and do some level of planning, like know your POV, know your characters. Have the beats at a minimum worked out.
Yeah.
Maybe scenes, I don't know. But at least the beats.
Yeah.
Know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
Know how it's going to end.
Know how it's going to end.
Know how your book is going to end.
There's one thing we both learned. Know how it's going to end.
Yeah, endings don't just appear like a magic trick. Well, unsatisfying ones do.
Yeah.
Bad magic tricks.
And you know them when you see them or read them. Awesome. So, shifting over, what have you been watching, reading, anything lately?
I'm still working through the same stuff. Millennium People by Ballard. Which is hysterical, and Authority from the Southern Reach trilogy, which is the sequel to Annihilation. And geez, I'm waiting for that book to pick up. It is not picking up yet.
Yeah.
So
okay.
And then I watched The Furiosas. And I know you're
Nice.
seeing that soon, so I
Yeah.
won't spoil anything.
Yeah,
I
please
will say
don't.
that I watched it, and it was a Mad Max movie.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. I assume she lives, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. But that's about it for me.
Yeah.
Maybe too much gaming lately. I'm just about done with
Oh,
Final Fantasy VII
oh,
Rebirth.
you need to be less gaming and more writing. Sounds like.
As I looked at it, they're like, "You played this game for 80 hours." I'm like, "How much of a book would have that have been?" You know?
That's two
Granted,
2 weeks of full time work, 40 hours a
but I
week,
also
right
I
there.
play at like 10 o'clock at night. Like
Yeah,
there's no way in hell that I'm gonna sit down and start writing at 10. I
yeah,
guess I could. If I
you
was
could.
super dedicated, I
Yeah,
could.
yeah, you could. Okay, so that's good. It's Final Fantasy Rebirth, huh?
It's great.
Good.
Anyway, what are you? How about you? What are you reading? What are you watching?
Watching not too much, but I watched Dune Part One and Part Two back to back on Monday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How
cranked through
come?
it. I don't know, just wanted to watch it because Part Two came out, I think, just on the old streaming services this weekend. So, yeah, it's still great, still really good.
Yeah.
Just yeah, still really really good. So,
I want to show this to my kids.
yeah,
I feel like they're such good movies.
movies that wrap you in a nice little sci-fi blanket you can cozy up to. So that's been it for watching. I haven't really watched much else, or just really had time to. There's
Don't
probably
rub it in.
couple.
Somebody's writing all the time.
No, that's the problem. I'm not doing that either. So I wish next time. Hopefully I can rub it in. Reading wise, I finished Salem's Lot. Enjoyed that quite a bit. And then I just started a handful of books. Like I always do this. I pick like 4 or 5 books, and I'm like, I'm gonna start all of them. And I read the first chapter. I'm like, don't do this. Just read one book at a time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started this one called The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. It was published back in like 1969, sci-fi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I guess it's a pretty important. It was suggested to me by a friend. I had it on my Goodreads list for a while. Another friend started reading it. I was like, oh, I'll read it at the same time. It's on my list. So started reading it. I guess it's a pretty important book in terms of just in the genre of feminist science fiction and gender exploration through sci-fi, which I thought was kind of interesting. So
That's cool.
yeah, I'm reading that. It's so it came out in 1969. It's funny because when I started reading, I was like, wow, this has got a very prosy, almost literary kind of vibe to it. Like when you go from like going from Salem's Lot, Stephen King, to this, I'm like, oh my god, my brain just came to a stop, like a halt.
Yeah.
It's not like a real easy read, and it's covering some heavy topics, and it's got this whole world going on, and character names are really long, and I'm like, I got to shift my brain from Salem's Lot, just killing everyone with vampires, to this, Yeah, so it's a pretty important book, I guess, for the time, especially for the time and the topics it's covering. So I'm like a third of the way through. For me right now, it's a little slow moving. I could imagine at the time it was probably like this masterpiece, and I'm sure it still is. But for me right now, I'm like, oof, it's a little slow moving. But yeah, I'm gonna see how that goes. And that's been it. That's been it for just trying to focus on getting that one done, and then on something else. I haven't been playing anything. I've been playing more of that Helldivers 2 game, but not even that much. So
Yeah.
the other day I opened up Steam and I was like, all right, I'm going to play a video game because I got some time. And I just stared at my list of games. Like it was like looking at like a box of baseball cards and being like, which one do I want to look at next?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like scrolling through. I'm like, cool, I have this baseball card. This collection of digital stories I'll never probably get to. So, but yeah, so that's been it for me. So
What are we doing next week?
next
week.
Next
Couple of weeks.
couple weeks. Next episode, we're going to get into backstory.
All right.
Yeah.
You guys can learn all about my traumatic backstory.
Yeah. Yeah. Not our own, Tim. Not our own. This isn't a therapy podcast. This is
Aw.
well, it kind of is. Yeah, so we're gonna get into backstory, character backstories, which would be kind of fun because I think my first time approach to it and my second time approach to it are very different. So I think it'd be kind of fun thing for us both to kind of pick at and explore. So that'll be the next episode. So until then, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, share with someone that you think would enjoy it as well. You can follow us on Instagram, Writer Syndrome Books, and you can find all our episodes, contact info if you're an author and want to talk to us at writersyndrome.com.